Welcome to the Event Marketers Toolbox. I am Chris Dunn. I'm with Blue Hive Exhibits and Bonjour de Montreal. So I'm up in Canada. Evan, you're also in Canada, over in Toronto. I'm up here for a show and took a break from the setup, slid back to my hotel, and super happy to be chatting away with a couple friends here. A guest host who has joined us a number of times. I'm going to kick it over to my friend Brendon. Brendon, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Chris. I'm not in Canada. I'm just in North Carolina. So how are y'all doing, I guess, is what we would say.
There you go.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me back again. I'm Brendon Hamlin. I run Hamlin Creative. We're a video and photo production company. We work a lot in the event space. So we work a lot with trade show partners and activation folks, agencies, creating content in those live event spaces. So it's really a pleasure to be here and participate here. And we're excited to have our good friend Evan Babins here with us. Hi, Evan. How you doing today?
Good. How's it going?
It's great. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I've been in the events world for the past 12 or 13 years now. I've really been fortunate to do a lot of things in the industry. I started off in DJing and AV production. I then moved into hospitality, so running venues, operations and event management side on the venues perspective. I then went to corporate event agencies and worked around the world, working on some great brands globally. And then since about 2019 or so, I've been back and forth between the agency side and in-house planning, working on events for the majority have been automotive, financial services, and pharmaceutical clients.
Cool. And Evan, you recently, or maybe not that recently, but you're back on the brand side for, is it Scotiabank?
Yes, I'm at Scotiabank now. So I'm part of Lighthouse Studios, which is an internal agency within Scotia's global marketing, where we work on internally and externally facing events across the bank.
Awesome, great. Well, I think we've got a great subject for discussion today with regards to vendors, how to partner best and get the maximum out of those relationships, how to pick them, all those things. So it'd be kind of interesting because, my company, Blue Hive's a little over 100 people. Brendon, on your side, you run a small lean team and you rely on a lot of partners to get things done. So this will be a really interesting idea that we can, a couple of small guys can talk to somebody representing a very large brand and how that tends to work out. Before we dive in to the meat and potatoes of the conversation, just a real quick word on our sponsors. We have two sponsors. The first is my company, Blue Hive Exhibits. We are in the primarily trade show, exhibit, and event space. We do a lot of corporate events, but really the bulk of our work is on the trade show floor. We are a group, we feel like we're kind of right-sized for a lot of different brands that are out there. We're not a tiny little boutique, and we're not the big guys where you're just a number. We're great on the creative side, on the customer service side, and really delivering a quality product with an enjoyable, engagement process. And then, in addition to that, we are partnered with a company called Fist Bump. Fist Bump is an agency that actually they're running the podcast right now. I originally bumped into Brandon Lee, the founder, a couple of years ago. I was doing some training with him. He kind of brought the idea of the podcast as a media channel to my attention, and they've been fantastic to work with. So right now, you may notice that we're having a little tech glitchy stuff going on with some of our video and audio matching up. But that's just something that we work through. But behind the scenes, we've got a great producer, Juana, who's helping out, and they handle all the heavy lift. They make it really easy for anybody to have a show, to create this content, something that's near and dear to both Evan and Brendon on that end. And at the same time, just keep things moving forward. We're already at episode number 29. I can't believe it. We've been doing this for more than a half a year, and it's been super, a super experience, and we're really reaching a lot of folks out there. We're doing our best to build a community of like-minded event people who can lean on each other, who can learn from each other, and keep everything moving forward, right? We're all rowing in the same direction. So, hey, to Carter out there, welcome aboard. He was a guest a couple weeks ago, and we always love when guests show up in the comments. So feel free to weigh in with some comments. We'll do our best to getting to everybody's questions. All right, so I've been babbling quite a bit here. I'm going to kick it back to Brendon, and he's going to start us off with really grilling Evan and holding the feet to the fire.
Yeah. So, Evan, it's really great to have you here today and learn more about your experience. I think what's really interesting is that coming out of a venue space, you said hotels and venues, vendor management and a vendor network is so critical. You're not doing it all yourself. You need help. And so how do you build that, or we'll talk about the importance of how you build that vendor network and why it's so important.
Yeah, so building your vendor network is really one of the most essential pieces of producing great events. I really like to use sort of a football analogy to describe this. So as the event producer, you're almost like the quarterback on the line, right? And you're calling the plays, you're calling the audibles, you're putting the plays in place. You're listening kind of the coach, so what the coach is telling you, and then it's your job to really get the team on the line in position to get that field goal, to get that win, to get that touchdown, right? And so when you translate that to how we work with partners and with vendors, you're sort of curating your database, you're curating your network, you're looking at who do I need to get the job done well with properly, who's going to give me the best value for the event based on, the quality of their work, the pricing that we're getting, all these different features that you look for when you look for partners and vendors. But it's all about building out that network of trusted people and companies who you like to work with, who you get along with, who you want to sort of emulate the way that you're working. Because at the end of the day, you want everyone who's like-minded working on that project with you to be in that sort of work group to bring those events to life.
I love that analogy. I think that, the word producer, I'm a producer, you're a producer, it's hard to define sometimes, but it really is that person that's orchestrating so many different things simultaneously. And some of those could be, people that are your colleagues on your staff, and other could be, outside companies that you're really pulling in. How do the vendor side of it really play that role in shaping a successful event? So how do you get all those partners coming in to really say, we're in it with you, like we're gonna do our best for you?
Yeah, I think it's about, like I kind of said before, I think it's about bringing the right people to the table. So if you're doing, let's say you're doing a virtual webinar, so you need, broadcast team, you need great camera crew, you need great motion graphics to get your graphics that you need to the right level. And it's all about, how you can leverage the people who know what they're doing the best. So you're getting the best people at their job all in the same space to execute on that vision. So as the producer, as the event producer, it's our role to basically use our superpower, which is finding and curating all the best people for the job. And then you have to trust that your vendors will then do their part and deliver what you're asking of them, doing as they are the, best in the game.
Hey, if I could jump in just with a question, something that we see on our end. Not every company that we work with comes to the table with an agency in tow. Some do. Certainly on the pharma side, they do, and sometimes there's multiple agencies involved. In all honesty, sometimes there's a bit of a rub or a bit of friction that could exist between an agency and a group like ours, and it can be challenging. And I think that there's these gray areas, right, where the companies potentially overlap and we do a little bit of the same stuff. But at the end of the day, what we always try to do is say, listen, yes, we are agency-like, but this is your game, right? Like, you guys are here. We're going to step back everywhere that we're not needed. You don't need to worry about us pilfering or taking a client or anything of that nature. Like, we're just here to help. Let us know, where you guys, kind of want to end and where we need to pick up. And I think when we think about those, you're managing the vendor network, right, with under your umbrella, but then you've got the vendors who need to play nice in the sandbox together. And I think having, as somebody who serves as a vendor to a lot of bigger brands, we need to figure out like what's our place and what do they expect us, and making sure that we're having those honest and transparent conversations up front, so that everybody on both sides is comfortable with the situation. They don't need to be like, oh, we don't want to expose this information to Blue Eye because they might do something with it, right? So I think that's probably something that's maybe not visible to you as the producer overhead, but making sure that the vendors are playing nice together and working well. Also, you've probably seen things go really well, and maybe things that needed to have an adult step into the room and have a conversation in the past.
Yeah, I think that's actually, just to your point quickly, I think that's actually a really great point, that like as the event producer, we're not always privy to what's going on behind the scenes on the vendor level, like what's going on behind the scenes, like at your offices and like with your teams and stuff. But at the end of the day, as long as what we're seeing on the surface is what we're expecting and what the client is expecting, I think as the event producer, like you're finding those people who and you've worked with and you've worked together with for many years. And so what they bring to the table, you hope, is, that ability to work well with others, that they're not going to Brendon's not going to take something that you're doing, Chris, and vice versa. And you trust, in 2025 that vendors are staying in their own lane, but also have the ability to jump in when necessary to help cover off other people. Right. And so I think that's a really important skill as a producer, as an event producer, to be able to find those vendors who balance and know how to balance that this is my lane conversation versus let me do what's necessary to make sure the event goes successful. So for example, like Chris, like you're on the AV side of things, like if, Brendon or the video team needs an extra power cable, or like an XLR is missing from the mic on the camera to the soundboard, like you're not going to be like, no, like I'm hands off, like I'm not doing that, when like you very well know how to do that, and like you very well are aware that what needs to be done to make that happen. Like if that's the best, like if that's what needs to be done for the event to be successful, like you're going to jump in and do it. But like there are definitely people and vendors who will back up and say, that's not my lane, that's not my piece, that's not my thing, figure it out on your own. And unfortunately, sometimes we get burned by those vendors. And that's kind of how you learn who you want to work with and who you like working with, and unfortunately, who you don't like working with.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just as an interesting analogy, I'm up here in Montreal. It's a very small show that we're doing. There's maybe 30 exhibitors or something like that. And the other exhibitors are represented by companies who do what I do, right? There's competition there setting up the booth for their brands. It's really interesting when you peel away the laundry, right? The color brand that I'm wearing, the group that's on the show floor, it doesn't really matter who you're working for. They all help each other. Tools are being borrowed between the groups on site. Oh crap. Yeah. I need a VGA cable. My Ethernet, I snap the head off the Ethernet cable, whatever it is, right? Yeah. People are, in that realm who are, building booths, whether it always be in the same city or they're traveling around. There's a lot of cohesion. It doesn't always happen, but for the most part, I've seen a lot of really heartwarming stuff where people are just willing to help out, even though we're competitors. Because at the end of the day, I think there is this kind of attitude that people are just like, we're here to get the job done and make sure the show goes off and goes well, right? So what do we need to do? We have a lane, but if I got to step outside of it to help somebody, I'm willing to do that.
And I think that's like a product, and I don't want to get into this conversation because it's like not this conversation, but like, I think there was a massive shift that happened after COVID, that the industry as a whole went from a competitive based industry to a cohesive based industry. And we had a lot of people that were previously of the mindset of like, I'm only doing what's in this box and here's my 4 pieces, to like, what do I need to do as a partner to make sure the event goes smoothly? And if that means coming outside of my lane and outside of my box, it's been way more cooperative of an industry since COVID, because we saw what happened where nobody had anything. And so now that we're back and like things are great and we're all back to normal, everyone in sort of my world, at least, and the people that I work with and I want to work with, have had a definite sort of shift, a mentality shift from a competitive based industry to a cooperative based industry. And I don't know if you guys are feeling the same way in your worlds too.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm glad you brought that up, because and it happened because we saw that everything on the when there is no work, it sucks for everybody across the board, right? So what do we do to try to, a rising tide raises all boats? Yes, we're going to experience a lift from this, but so will other people across the board, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing for the industry everywhere. Brendon, I got to warn you, there's a woman with the same last name as you is checking in from somewhere in Georgia.
What?
And she's offering up you as AV help.
Well, that's my agent.
Fantastic.
Well, what's interesting? So yeah, that's my wife. She is in St. Simons, Georgia, at the beach, and I'm not there. I'm here with you guys. So
what's so interesting is she is jealous of what you're doing currently, not the other way around.
No doubt.
But what she says is true. So many times, we are not an AV company. We are a production company that's capturing content inside, events. And so what happens a lot of times, though, is we are, I like to call us AV whisperers. And so we're able to help the client, talk to the AV group and say, okay, this is what needs to happen. And it just is like a great translation. Like, they don't have to talk directly to the AV folks. We can talk to the AV folks and make sure that it happens the right way. So it is a little bit of an added value thing that we throw in when we get into a conference or something like that, where there's stuff on screens, and we want to make sure, because a lot of times we've created that stuff too, so we have a vested interest to make sure that it looks great. Right. But so she's also commenting on the way.
I love having Sever here. She's one of our best and most loyal listeners.
Yeah. We'll have to have her on the podcast someday.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to pivot ever so slightly, although we've already kind of talked about it. So building trust and collaborating effectively with vendors, right? This is obviously a strategy to this, and I think if you've been around for a while, you just kind of know the type of people that you kind of get along with. But can you, Evan, kind of just maybe dial in or roll out the playbook that you've got on, like, what are you looking at for strategies to create kind of those long-term relationships? How does that play out? What are you looking for character traits and skill sets in those potential partners or vendors?
Yeah, I always tell, it's a great conversation. I love having this piece of it. And really what it comes down for me is two pieces. There's the pre-event piece, and then there's the during and the post-event piece. And for me, working with great vendors and working with great partners, and there is a difference between those two terminologies, which we'll get to in a couple of minutes, but working with great partners, it's almost more important from once the contract is signed up until show day, how you get from A to B. That's often more important than what happens actually on site and post, because at the end of the day, and I hate to do it, and I hate to sort of bring the industry down to the same, but if I have a video crew A and video crew B, and they both have the same cameras and they both have the same output levels on their cameras, I'm going to get the same content. I'm going to get the same creative. I'm going to get the same aspects. What's different, and what the biggest selling feature for me is, how we got to that show. So what was the communication like? Was the partner that you're working with, were they able to answer your email in a relatively, reasonable time frame? Did you have to wait 10 days to get an answer back on a question you asked in an email? Those are the pieces that I look for when I'm building out my vendor network. It's who is getting back to you? Who is getting back to you with relevant information that helps you move the needle forward? If someone is not doing all of those things, maybe they're not the people to work with, right? So that's that pre-event piece that's super important and is critical to the process. Mm-hmm. And then you get the on-site piece, which is, I would say if it's not the number one thing, it's like 1B, right? So it's like, how are they showing up on site? Are they professional? Are they like, if you tell them, like, if you're doing like a photo and video team, like, are they wearing all black? Are they blending into the background? Are they wearing, a hot pink, outfit that like makes them the star of the show, where like they're not the star of the show, right? Like, when they're on site, are they like talking to, clients? Are they not talking to clients? Have you given them the ability to do so? So like, how are they actually showing up on site? How are they acting on site? What's their sort of demeanor? And like, are they professional? Are they not professional? They're leaving a giant mess of cables at front of house when you're trying to do a simple patch in. Like, all of these pieces tell you a lot about the vendors that you're working with. And unfortunately, sometimes they tell you who you're not going to work with again after that show is done.
Yeah. You brought up a bunch of interesting stuff there. If I just, we all have vendors that we choose, right? We partner with people, we're choosing vendors. And your point about getting back to people quickly with an email answer, it's so easy. It should be table stakes, but it doesn't happen automatically. And I can think of a very specific situation where one of the AV partners that we have, they do a fine job on site, but they're horrible at the communication and getting back to us with numbers. So you know what, when it comes to like, who are we going to put this bid out to, the account managers who kind of run that process are like, I'm going to deal with these guys over here because I get a quick answer. I don't want to wait 5 days for the other people. So even if your execution is great and your pricing is well in line or even a little bit more friendly, if you're not doing the stuff on the front end that's simple, you're not going to get those opportunities. So that's a huge thing for anybody who's out there just listening. And, if you're on bids and you're trying to get work, like, think about doing the little stuff well. And then opportunities will continue to come. And I just kind of want to pivot off of that and say, Evan, you as a larger brand, and not just now, but also in your past lives and so forth, you're responsible for choosing partners, for choosing vendors, and hopefully in your answer, you can also help delineate what your thoughts are on a partner versus a vendor. But like Brendon and I are answering RFPs, or, we're throwing our hat in the ring for opportunities. Is there any kind of insight that you can give to smaller groups who are going after larger clients as to like, how do we show up? How do we put our best foot forward so that we are in position to be chosen for an opportunity?
Yeah. So let's define first what a vendor is and what a partner is. And so for me, I would say a vendor is a company who gets hired for a one-time event that there's no longevity, there's no relationship, it's just like, maybe you're like the in-house, exclusive provider of X type of vendor. If it's a catering company, if it's Encore AV, if it's, whatever it is, if like you're like venue exclusive that you have to choose them to work at that venue, they are simply a vendor who's working on that show for you. A partner is someone in a company who you have a relationship with. Maybe you've done multiple shows with them. You know them. They're not just someone who's coming to work on the show with you, but they're someone who's there along the ride, whether it's part of your career. If you brought them from company, like I have a couple of, partners who I've brought with me within the last multiple companies that I've worked for, because I have a personal relationship with these companies that I have then created into business relationships at the different companies I've worked for. So that to me is the partnership. And that to me is a partner. And the sort of to dumb it down and to make it as simple as possible, if you need something fixed at 2:00 in the morning, the night before the show starts, the partner will be there to move mountains and will help you. The vendor will say, sorry, we're closed. Come back to us at 9 a.m. on Monday. And that's the difference. So that to me is like how we define between vendors and partners. And then sort of,
Evan, can I just interrupt before you go? Because we got a question here that I think fits in really well. And it looks like LinkedIn user, but I understand this is from Bill L. So what he asks or puts forth is, so we were talking about stand in your lane versus being willing to do what it takes. So, except on the client side, at least in his experience, clients potentially have become a little bit more delineated in keeping vendors versus partners. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly where he was going with this, but from your standpoint, keeping people, not letting them be close and become a partner, and always just kind of dealing with people on a transactional basis. That's kind of what I'm reading into it, is like, I don't really want a partner. I don't want to lock in with anybody. I want to hire somebody, have a set expectation that you're here for this just one job, get it done, do your best, and then I'm going to move on. I'm curious. I think we can probably read into the question a few different ways, but thought process on your end. I want a partner. We want to be partners with our clients, and we want to partner with other people. So to me, this doesn't make a lot of sense, but I can see where some people might operate in that realm.
Yeah, and I think, sort of from my perspective, I think the goal is always to find partners, and the goal is to always, when you're building your network and you're building your vendor team, like I mentioned off the top, like that football analogy, like if I've got people on the line who are partners, I know as the quarterback that they're going to have my back and I'm going to have their back, right? If they're just a vendor because they're the required vendor to use for AV, let's say, at the venue, and you don't have an option, or they're the rigging and power supplier and you have to use them, I'm not going to go out of my way to have that more than a transactional scenario for that perspective, because I know it's not going to be anything more than they're the people that are plugging in the power distro to the wall, and or they're the people that are running your lines for your hardwire internet. There's no benefit to me there, but if I can curate all my other partners that are actual true partners, that's where my energy will go. That's where my mindset will go. That's where the majority of my time will go, is working with those people who I know have a vested interest in me, in my client, and in the event.
Yeah, spot on. That's excellent. All right, I kind of pushed you in a slightly different direction, but let's circle back to where you were going.
Yeah. So then, for smaller companies, so I've been this company and the company before was also another large brand in the tech world. So I think when it comes to smaller companies trying to break into working for large organizations, large corporations, and I literally had a meeting with somebody an hour ago about this, right before we sort of jumped on and we sort of did our tech checks and everything else. And it was a promotional swag company who I was talking to, and they were like, how do we get in? And I have a personal relationship with the company. I haven't brought them into where I am now yet, but they're trying to get in. And what do we do? And how do we get there? And the best thing I told him was listen, we have a roster of partners who we work for and we work with right now for our swag and gifting. That's not going to change in the short term. Eventually it will change. Eventually we will add, we will remove. One of the companies we work with now, we're having a bit of an issue with. So I was like, listen, the best thing you can do now is I will let you know when I have RFPs. You should respond to those RFPs, knowing that you probably won't get the business because we can't give people business without, having them onboarded and MSAs and everything else that has to be done. But if I can learn the process that you use and we can start figuring out how we work well together, once it's time to flip that switch and once we're ready to onboard you as a new vendor, we're not going to have to deal with the bullshit of how do I work? How do you work? What's the communication style? Everything we talked about earlier about that pre-event relationship stuff that you have to figure out. So, and I was like, listen, you can take me up on that and you can also say no, and I will respect both of your answers if you don't want to put in the work knowing you're not going to get the business until we're onboarded and signed and whatever else. And he was like, no, I'm so down for that. And I'm so down to get stuff in front of you so you can see how we work and you can see how we display things and how we do our pitch decks and everything else. And that's a huge win because then once we get to that point that we're ready, we don't have any of that learning curve to get through, and we can just start rolling. So it's like responding to RFPs, knowing you may or may not get the work. It's putting yourself out on the line, finding contacts at the companies who you want to work with. Like, it's very true in the same scenario, like when you're job hunting, when you're looking for a new job. Like, I always took the mindset of like, what companies do I want to work for? Find people within that company to try to get an in with, so that you're not just blasting out a resume into a black hole. And it's the same thing from moving from a vendor to becoming a partner. It's like, find the companies you want to work with, find people inside those companies who you think will be the right people to talk to, like event team, or like, find, on a lower scale, onboarding teams or procurement teams who you're going to need to deal with. Find your in, and then once you're in, you can sort of carve your path in that company once you have that in.
Those are some awesome recommendations on how to get in the door. And as a salesperson, right, that's what we do. We're banging on doors, and rarely is the answer yes, but sometimes the answer is like no. However, like, give it some time, and we'd like to see how you work first. So I think that's a great message to groups out there who are trying to get their foot in the door with a bigger organization, or partner with different groups. Is like, just because it doesn't work on that first event, like, got to be willing to do the work, to have the conversations and to lay the groundwork, so that you're gonna see some opportunities in the coming up in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right, Brendon, back to you, my friend.
Yeah, so I'm curious, as you have built your network, and in that network you have vendors, and in that network you have partners, but how do you manage that network so that, ultimately we'd love for everybody to be a partner and be vested and 100% in and looking out for our best interest. And we know that's not always going to happen, but how do you manage that network to a point where you could convert some of those people from just the transactional vendor relationship into something maybe a little more substantive and more like a partner?
I think so. Yeah, it's a great question. I think it definitely takes some finessing, and you need to really be able to, and it's hard with some of these vendors who are like exclusive to venues. Like, and I hate to pick on Encore more and more, but like, it's just like the easiest one to pick on, because like they're just so everywhere and they're so transactional. And I just like, and I don't want anyone to think like that's listening or watching that like I have beef with Encore, because like I think I have the same beef that everybody has with Encore. Nothing different, nothing more, nothing less. But and I have contacts there, and I've had like people that I've known for many years that work at Encore that have come in and out and whatever. But I think when a company is like, let's go back to the rigging and power example that I gave earlier. Like, generally speaking, we don't see, as event producers, we don't see those people. They're in before the load-in happens. They're running your lines. They're running the power distros. They're dropping chains for the trussing. What we see is our AV company who we work with, who come in, obviously if you're allowed to bring in your own AV, but we see that crew in, and we see that crew at like rehearsals and at the show and everything else. So when you don't see the vendors, like another great example of that is like the companies who generally run your hardwire internet lines. Generally speaking, for trade shows, those are done before the floor is down on the trade show floor, which is well before clients come in, we come in, and that's all done. So we don't see those people. We don't know those people. We don't really have a relationship. So that is difficult to turn those into partners. Where you have a bit of flexibility on that, I will say, is if there's and big events and big shows, generally you would have like a pre-con meeting where all your vendors are around the table. You go through the whole show, you do everything. That's your opportunity there, I think, to make those connections, to forge those relationships, to be able to be like, hey, this is what I do. This is what you do. Can we talk? Can we chat? Can we meet on the sidelines now that I know who you are? And then you can start and build and curate those relationships. So it's a bit of a tricky scenario, especially from those like more invisible vendors that you have and that exist in the world. Not impossible, but I would say it there's easier vendors and harder vendors to get those relationships to move from vendor to partner.
Yeah. Can I wish you, Brandon, I know you've got another question here to follow through, but Evan brought up, trade shows. Specifically, anybody who's done a trade show understands that there's a tremendous amount of people, and companies that are in the background, Freeman, GES, Encore, and then all of the, sometimes, internet comes from the convention center. And then there's the, the association running the show. There's an awful lot of cooks in the kitchen. And it doesn't happen necessarily with smaller or medium-sized shows, especially if your booth or your stand is not all that elaborate. But I can say that we've had very good luck when we've got a large, elaborate project, getting on the phone with the head of rigging, with the head of electrical, with, the folks who are managing the material handling. If you're bringing in massive machines that weigh 40,000 pounds, that doesn't happen, without some conversations. We do the restaurant show for a client of ours, and we literally are building a restaurant on site within like 4 days. There's a lot that needs to happen between electrical, plumbing, rigging, everything to get all that stuff done. So we're having all these pre-conversations, and I want to say that at the end of the day, those folks who are normally invisible, who are just doing their thing behind the scenes, by having those conversations, we change what that relationship looks like dramatically. And they thank us at the end of the conversation. They're like, thank you so much for having this call with us, because we've just avoided wasting hours and hours guessing at what it is that you guys want or what you expect. So we all want to vilify the GCs like the Freemans and the GS, and there's a lot there that I think is reasonable and the Encores. But at the end of the day, it's important for folks on our side of the fence to be willing to have those conversations, to at least put forth, like, here are the drawings, here are the expectations, here's our timing, here's what we're thinking. What do you recommend, right? How do you guys want to hang this sign? It's pretty elaborate. What would you guys do? Let's talk about it. And a lot of times just having those conversations is a huge difference, maker on that end. So you got to be a good partner, to the people who are hiring you, if you want to in turn turn around and hire people and expect them to be good partners for you. It goes both ways.
100%.
Yeah. Are there other ideas you have, Evan, about sort of, leaning on your vendors and really getting their buy-in and getting them to, just like Chris was saying, like really, bring their expertise and not just punch the clock and if it's 5 o'clock, I'm out of here. I know it's not done. Like, how do you really get them motivated to help you?
I think that's like a bit of a give and take. I think it needs to come from, not only the vendor teams, the partner teams, and like their teams telling them and sort of running down the list of like, here's the expectations. And, especially if you're dealing with an account manager, and then like that account manager has like on-site people that are not who you deal with on a one-to-one basis, like that information is getting relayed to somebody else who's actually on site. You need to make sure that your expectations are being met and your expectations are being honored. And then, as like the person running the show, the event producer, whatever it is, you need to also be realistic with like, yes, there are long show days. Yes, setup days are long. Strike days are long. But like, I always look at it as like, if your crew isn't treated as a real person, and this is like a massive industry-wide conversation, like you need to treat your crew and your team just like anybody else. Like they are working 16, 17, 18-hour days. If you don't, as the event producer, build in time for them to take breaks, have meals, have rest time, have downtime, they're not going to perform and they're not going to do what you need to do so that your show looks great. So like, it's not just the conversation of like, what does it look like from an agenda and a perspective of like the guest perspective and the attendee side, but it's like, how are you taking care of the crew and your team and your partners? Like to use a photographer example, like your photographer is shooting all day long. if you have them back to back to back to back to back, every single session, every single minute filled out, I can almost guarantee you, and I'm not a photographer, but like I can guarantee you by the third session, you're going to start getting shitty photos, right? And you're going to get video that's like not what you want it to be because they're getting burned out and they're getting tired, and they need a break and they need to be able to, take a couple of minutes to upload their SD card to the computer to clear out the card so that they have more room. And with that gives them a chance to get a coffee or a muffin or like whatever. Like we talk a lot about building in rests for attendees because attendees have a very small attention span these days, and we all know that. But it's the same truth is for your partners and the team that's building and working on the show. And I think that's the part of the industry that people forget about and they don't really talk about too much. And it's so important, and it's almost critical that like your event is reliant on that. And if you don't do that, the output of the event will not be where you want it to be.
Totally. I can tell you from experience as a young producer, saying, let's just grab some coffees and keep going, that, I quickly manifest burnout in my team because I wasn't giving them the time. So I've learned you got to take care of the humans.
Yeah. And that's like also part of like when we're working on, run of show documents and timelines and everything else, it's like, if you're not thinking about that kind of stuff, and if you're not getting your partner's input on those documents, like as the event producer, like I never work on those documents in a silo because like I don't always know as a videographer or as an AV team or as a catering company, like what do you need, what time, how long do you need before X things happens that you need to do so you're ready for that cue or that action or whatever, right? So you should always be talking to your vendors and your partners and getting their input on those documents because like I said earlier, like I'm not the expert on everything in the events world. Like I'm an expert of putting the right people in place that are the experts, but like I'm not a videography expert. Like I don't know how many cameras that I always need to get the shot that I'm looking for, and like having the ability to get multiple angles and multiple shots simultaneously to cover the entire event main stage, right? So, but if I work with the right people, they tell me what they need and how long they need to prep or to go between setups, or like if we're in the main room and it ends at 11 and then we have to go to a breakout room and the video team needs an hour to tear down and reset up.
It's
like
always an hour.
I can't have that show start, the next piece of the show start in 25 minutes because they're not going to be ready. And like, then it's going to affect the output and the live stream and all these things. Like it all bubbles up and it all goes together. So if like, I think that what all that comes down to is like, don't silo yourself from your partners, make your partners part of your process and give them a seat at the table and make it very well known that they are there for a reason to have that seat at the table because they're as equal to the operation of the event as you are as the event producer.
Yeah, 100%. And one other thing I'll just add, as that event producer, it's really your job to protect all of those people many times from the client. Because the client, they're getting their breaks and they're getting their meals and they're getting their stuff, and they're going to just keep on asking. And so I think that it's really incumbent upon that producer to be the wall to say, look, you're not going to get what you want if we don't let these guys take a break.
For sure. And honestly, like Sarah just put a great point in the chat, and I just want to bring that up. Like so many times people say like, oh, we have to save budget, we have to save money, we have to get like, if I know the show needs, 4 shooters for video and 3 shooters for photo to capture because it's, a multi-venue show in the same city, and we have general session at this convention center, and then we're going to an evening event, right afterwards with no breaks. Like you can't have the same people in multiple places. So like to struggle to burn out your team on site because you can't find $5,000 more to hire on one or two more people. It literally is a make or break. Like I kind of was saying before, that like it's such a justifiable expense or cost to take that on, to make sure that no one's getting burned out, that everyone is, on their game, that no one's stretched too thin. Because like how many times have we seen, a photographer miss like an important shot because they're on the way from somewhere else and it started before they were ready, right? And like then on the end of the day, like 3 months later, when your show is done and you're like getting ready to do your exports and you're doing recap posts on social, or you're at your AGM like 6 months later and you have to put video together of a recap from all the events you did over the whole year, and you realize that you missed like the CEO cutting the ribbon of the new branch that was opening, and that was the most important part of that video because you sacrificed $1,000 to not hire another shooter. Like everything works together and everything affects each other, and what you do before the show affects what happens 9 months later, and like 2 years later when you're trying to find footage from a show that happens every 2 years that you want to try to replicate or do better at, and then you realize, oh, we forgot to hire a video team because we had to cut a cost 2 years ago, and now we have no idea what happened for our show this year.
Yep.
Evan, you got a huge fan. Huge fan.
We'll end the rant on that. We'll end the rant on that piece.
Apparently, we get a chord. I think.
I just like so many people just like they think that you can sacrifice budget, and like budget is everything. And don't get me wrong, like budget is a big piece of events. I'm not trying to minimize that. And like, yes, we have to stick to budgets, and certain times, especially on where I'm my role now, where I'm in house, we get certain budgets for our global events for the year, and on an individual level, we only have a certain number of dollars to spend on each event. But like, if you know what you're doing and like how to spend that money, you shouldn't have to sacrifice what you're trying to do for the event if you're working with great partners who have your back, who will help you out if you need them to help you out from a cost perspective. Like if I've been working with someone for 5 or 10 years and like I need to call in a favor because I have an event that's a smaller budget, but I know I need to get something out of it, a partner will be able to be like, yes, I see that relationship. I see the help that you need now, and we'll make it up on the next event or the other event, coming up down the future. So like, I just like get really like passionate about it. Like, don't sacrifice for the sake of just cutting a number. Call in your favors, call in your partners, find the people who will have your back, that will get you what you need in the best way possible.
And it's why cultivating a partnership makes, rather than just, a race to the bottom to find something cheaper, really is gonna hurt you in the long run.
100%.
I love it. Well, listen, we are at 48 minutes. This has flown by. So we're gonna start to kind of put a wraps on it. But just a shout out to a couple of folks. Chris Musgrave with a couple of great comments in there. I think we kind of probably addressed and answered a couple of those things with regards to what he's seeing there from these mega vendors becoming, Freeman's buying all sorts of people, or Encore, bought all of the other AV groups, so you're right. It becomes more difficult when we're dealing with these giant conglomerations. And that's, I think, one of the reasons, and granted, it's not always possible, but when you look to a smaller organization, you're not just going to be a number, because, there's the desire to form a proper partnership that works both ways when you're working with a group, and you can feel confident that they're going to have your back versus, again, who are you again? You're just a number.
Right.
So, Evan, before we wrap up here, I asked you ahead of time to maybe have 3 like takeaways, and maybe they're just a recap on what we've already talked about. But for our listeners and our viewers, are there three kind of action items or anything that you can leave us with that will kind of put a nice bow on everything we've talked about today?
Yeah, I would say number one is like be that quarterback in the room. Find the right people who will help you and will have your back and you'll have their back. So that's number one. I think number two is like when you get burned, learn from that. Learn what you did and what you can do so that it doesn't happen again. So learn from the mistakes that will always be made. Don't let them happen again. Don't let yourself be burned by the same vendor or similar vendors who act the same way. And then number three, I think is like treat partners the way you want to be treated by your clients. And then everyone will be able to work together in unison and in harmony that you will be able to deliver great events. And that's from every single lens. That's from the client lens. That's from the producer lens. That's from the partner lens. Everyone is just out here looking to do great work, working with great people, doing awesome events. And like, that's my mantra in life is like, let's do cool shit with great people who want to have fun and have a great time doing it. So find your village, find your crew, however you want to call it. Find the people who you know at 2 a.m, the night before the show, you can call and they'll pick up the phone and they won't ignore your call. And if you have great stuff, like share it with the industry, bring it to the world, let everyone see it. Don't keep it behind closed doors because we all want to learn from each other. And so if I can see something that Brendon did on site that is super cool, like maybe I can adapt it and use it in my own world and how we do things, not stealing his ideas, but like, let's all keep that cooperative industry mindset going and let's just all have a great time.
There you go. That's a fantastic bow on exactly what we're trying to do here on the Event Marketers Toolbox. So, Evan, after this great conversation, I think there's a lot of folks out there that are wondering, how do I get more Evan Babins in my world? What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on social. I, try to post as much as possible. I've got a hot topic that I posted about yesterday on LinkedIn. So if you haven't checked it out, we're talking about that post yesterday was how you can turn Costco into an event venue, and it's a lot of fun. Got a lot of really fun comments on that one. So if you haven't checked out that post, check it out. But yeah, I'm around.
The catering bill is going to be for the $1.50 hot dogs, right? So at least
exactly.
Have a captain.
Exactly. Yeah, somebody mentioned like there was a comment that was like we can use the executive membership as like selling it as sponsorship for those executive members. Like there's like it's a total missed opportunity that Costco has totally missed the boat on, and I'm hoping maybe they'll see it and give me credit for it.
There we go. Oh, fantastic. That's good stuff. So, well, awesome, guys. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thanks everybody who took part in the conversation. I do see a lot of input here. Carter, Sarah, Chris Musgrave, Bill. Thanks everybody for being part of our conversation here. This event is obviously captured and will be available here on LinkedIn and on YouTube as the video piece. And we're also on all of the podcast channels as well. So that usually comes out in a couple of days. So I'm a Spotify guy. I listen to a lot of other podcasts, and then every once in a while, my thing serves me up my own podcast, which I feel odd listening to, but at the same time, it's like, well, maybe I need to listen to this and see what I can do better next time. So appreciate everybody here on screen. Brendon, thank you very much. Evan, always a pleasure to catch up, and thanks for being our guest. Juana from behind the scenes, thanks for running a great show. And everybody out there who has just watched us, and to those folks who are going to be listening to us. So thanks very much. Cheers. Happy eventing, everybody. And we'll see you again next week on the Toolbox.